The final chapter on JFK, Chapter 5, Segment 2, 1956 DNC.
Thanks for tuning in. We are going to be discussing the 1956 Democratic National Convention. The convention was held in Chicago, Illinois in the summer of 1956, and it really wasn't a big deal because the president at the time was a fellow by the name of Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was a World War II hero, and he was running again in 1956. And based upon his results of winning in 1952, which was basically a slaughter, whoever ran against him on the other side didn't really have a chance to win. But they did have a chance to make a name for themselves entering 1960 when Eisenhower couldn't run again. And that's the reason why Lyndon Johnson, coming off a major heart attack, wanted to get to the convention and wanted to be the nominee. And that's why Jack Kennedy, a nobody at that point in time, wanted to get into that convention and become known. Because they didn't have to be known in 56 as a loser against Eisenhower, but they would be known nationally in 1960. In 1956, Senator Lyndon Johnson recognized the importance of the Chicago Convention to accomplish his dream. Less than a year before he had suffered a massive heart attack, he had been left bedridden for the rest of the year. And during that long recovery, the 47-year-old Johnson realized that with his life expectancy, he may never accomplish his dream. Now, in 1956, Adlai Stevenson, the former governor of Illinois, and who had been the party's nominee in 1952, was the expected nominee for the convention. But to wrestle the nomination from Stevenson, Johnson decided that he would use his political power, and the first thing he did was he convinced former President Harry Truman not to endorse Stevenson at the convention. This was a blow to Stevenson's chances to repeat in 1956 what he did in 52. Johnson followed that by convincing his close friend, House Speaker Texas Congressman Sam Rayburn, to support Johnson instead of Stevenson. So Johnson was coming into the convention with a strong chance of perhaps wrestling the nomination away from Adlai Stevenson. On the other hand, Kennedy came into the convention not hoping to wrestle the nomination away from Stevenson, but rather to be known. And with that regard, he had originally written a book in the 1940s called Why England Slept, in which people became aware of him. For this convention, Kennedy came out with another book, and that was called Profiles in Courage. Kennedy went around the country with this book, being interviewed on talk shows, radio shows, and by newspapers talking about the book rather than anything else, but at least having the public know who he was. While it has been said that Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, tried to secure the second position or vice presidential position on the ticket with Adlai Stevenson by offering to pay Stevenson off, Stevenson did not take the money, but he was honorable enough to say that he would leave the door wide open and let the convention delegates decide who his vice presidential running mate would be. The key for Kennedy at the 1956 convention was that his father managed to secure a speaking spot for him at the convention. At that time, he appeared before a national television audience of millions, looking like a movie star and sounding like one. And for the first time, America recognized John F. Kennedy as a potential political leader. Now, with that said, hatred between the Kennedy family and Lyndon Johnson, and that was because Kennedy's father not only contacted Adlai Stevenson, Joe Kennedy went to Lyndon Johnson and he offered him a similar payoff, and that is if Johnson won, he would pay Johnson money to have Kennedy on the ticket. According to most historians, not only did Lyndon Johnson decline Kennedy's offer, but he did it in a crude manner. Now, in the end, Stevenson won on the first ballot. Johnson was embarrassed. A deflated political figure without strong support as a potential 1960 presidential candidate. But for Jack Kennedy, he left the convention after giving a televised speech to all of America. It was for Jack Kennedy a stepping stone to the White House. The 1956 Democratic National Convention did not work out the way Lyndon Johnson wanted it. He left angry, a loser. He lost to the same guy who had lost to Dwight Eisenhower in 1952 and was most likely going to be losing to Eisenhower in 1956. And Johnson, when he left the convention, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to help the party and I'm going to support the ticket and still run around the country and help, went back to Washington as an angry man. And he vowed to himself, when I come back in 1960, I'm going to come back with more power and more money than I had in 1956, and I'm going to win that convention. That's what Johnson's goal was when he left. And Kennedy, on the other hand, who came into the convention as basically an unknown, was the only person to come out of there as a rising star. Somebody new in the campaign, somebody handsome. He had managed to get himself, although not on the ticket as a vice presidential running mate to Adlai Stevenson, he did get a spot speaking where millions of people got to see this handsome, articulate, well-educated, young, youthful person speaking, and he was the leader of the Democrat Party, hopefully in 1960. Hope to see you in the next segment.